Ratnagar, thank you for inviting me. It's my privilege. Sometimes when somebody introduces me, I tend to start to believe it. So I try to be vain about it. But uh, good afternoon. And I know that this is a very, very exciting setup. Yeah, I have not come across many situations where organizers have tried to marry all connected stakeholders in the ecosystem to bring together to help startups in this particular way. I have seen startup ecosystems where you find investors and the companies or advisors and the companies, but not to the full extent of how do you commercialize it, how do you get to exit, all those kinds of parameters are not generally covered. So my compliments to the organizers for doing this because, and I'll talk you through some of my experiences. I think this is something that was absolutely necessary. But let me start with a very simple story that in about 2017 or some around 2017 sometime, four young IIT graduates walked into my office and said they are doing a startup in technology. And that time I used to head Johnson and Johnson. So I asked them that what can we be of use to you? And they said, no, we can, gamify anything. So it was quite interesting to me just to listen to it. But I said, look, I'm not sure what can I do with it, but you explain to me what can you gamify. And they went on talking about a few things. I told them, look, I have a problem, and if you can resolve that problem, then you are going somewhere. Otherwise, it's fine. You have technical capabilities of gamify things, but I don't see practical use of it. So I told them about my problem of having large set of salespeople who generally spend 60% of the day waiting for their customers to meet them. So lose a lot of time over it. And in that time, they can do nothing productive. So, and I told them that one of my bigger problems is then if I have to get them to train on something, I have to get them out of their working. So can you do something by marrying gaming to training? And they said, fine, we'll do it. And with some iteration in about 9 to 12 months, we gamified the entire training system of the company. Today, they are a big unicorn. I don't want to name them because it would be rather inappropriate without their permission. But imagine simple things turning out to be very, very big. Coming to my industry, I think biotech is probably one of the most exciting industries in terms of startups. This industry has been plagued by the disease of high cost of invention or discoveries. Imagine when we get a new drug to the market, we would have already spent anywhere between $1 to $2 billion. This is not cheap money. I always challenge executives, senior executives from Google or one of the Facebook or any of those companies and tell them, look, you don't take enough risk, and neither are you that creative, nor are you that innovative. Look at the pharma industry, how much it has to invest and how much we carry 100% risk of what we do. So that is the kind of zone we are in as an industry where it is just too expensive to do something new. But biotech has probably crossing new frontiers. What is happening with biotech is that it doesn't require the complete big setup that a pharma chemistry engine requires, and therefore can literally lead to better innovation in a smaller setup. And ideas can be generated by many people. The problem is, how do you marry ideas to getting funding and trying to get them to ideas which can solve suffering or human problems? At the heart of all this is trying to solve the unmet medical need or disease treatments which do not exist. Now, if that is the case, what we have seen in the last few years, I'll tell you something globally and then I'll come a little bit to India. But even globally, if you see, there are about 3,100 startups that have been funded by VCs in the last 6 years in biotech space, just biotech space. The total VC involvement in biotech funding for research is $52 billion. But the starkly interesting figure is that $35 billion of that has gone to startup biotechs. So nearly 70% of the investment has gone to startup biotechs. And that just shows the amount of confidence VCs have in trying to look at biotech as an industry which can really transform itself into solving causes that humanity is hurting with, at the same time creating economic models by which it really justifies investment. So this is a very, very classic case of trying to solve real problems, but with the ability to make business too. So in an industry where you can claim, I don't want to compare it with any other industry, but easily this industry can claim to be doing good and doing well all the time. Not, you don't find companies where you, or industries where you do good and do well, both together. So with this ability and very exciting areas, if I tell you the areas where startups are focusing in biotech, they're very exciting. For example, there is cell therapy, the new kind of cell therapy which is looking at tissues or cells in trying to treat. So you look at malignancies. So cells are multiplying without any reason. So cancers. So these are areas which are really being worked upon, and already you have some success. Yeah? You really are seeing some very CAR-T, for example, is a new therapy for cancer, which can clearly eradicate that particular cancer in some cases. So you're starting to see, and this was a Chinese small biotech which was held by a big pharma. Then you see gene therapies or modulating DNA, and RNA. You have seen the great example of today is what happened during the pandemic. What are these companies which gave you vaccines? You hear of AstraZeneca, you in India, you hear of Serum Institute, you hear of Pfizer. Are these the companies that solved these problems and actually brought research to the table? No. If you go to the root of what has solved these issues, you find that some scientists at Oxford tried to create a spike protein based vaccine in a way, with the old attenuated vaccine technology, but very effective. And then Astra made the contract to get it to market in India. The same license was given to Serum Institute, and you ended up saving a lot of lives. Two Turkish scientists who have been struggling for the last 10 years to tell VCs that the future is mRNA or the RNA-based vaccines. Nobody was listening to them. These German scientists ultimately got funding from Pfizer, who in turn had got that funding from the US government. So it was not even Pfizer money. But Pfizer went in first to do a contract with them, and today we call it a Pfizer vaccine, when actually it is the vaccine of two Turkish scientists in Germany. Same with Moderna. Moderna was crying hoarse. Those scientists were crying hoarse that mRNA is the platform of the future. Nobody listened. And suddenly you have a company which did $20 billion in 1 year sale. So there is so much hope in this area and in technology that is being driven in this area, that you will see that now this mRNA platform has two big advantages. One advantage it has is that it is a proven technology to add more diseases to vaccines. And tomorrow you can fight maybe dengue, malaria, or maybe we can look at unsolvable things like Klebsiella, look at HIV. We can look at more tuberculosis. We can look at more and more devices through this technology, because either you quickly succeed or you quickly fail. And the second is the reliability that we have with this kind of platforms, that vaccines used to take minimum 5 to 7 years of getting efficacy data. Today, you don't need that, because you have platforms which, at least with the effectiveness data, we can go to the market and go to the regulator and say you can solve it. So these are a couple of platforms that are there. Precision medicine. I'll tell you one very interesting thing that is happening with startups. A lot of startups are working on the fact that you can do predictive oncology. Your immuno-oncology, your CAR-T therapy, you have the old chemotherapy, you have all kinds of now tools that are coming into the marketplace, which are advancing the ability to treat cancers. And with predictive oncology work that is happening in startup biotechs, you actually can predict how treatments can result into outcomes. And therefore, you can treat cancers in a more directive fashion or a more focused fashion. By 2030, and this is something that may surprise you, but by 2030, most cancers we would be able to treat reasonably and increase quality of life plus expectancy of life. Earlier, expectancy of life was increasing a little bit, quality of life was not. Slowly, quality of life is getting little better, but then now we are very sure that by another, let's say 7 to 10 years time, we are going to see a situation where quality of life and expectancy of life both will be impacted positively because of the startups that we are having in this area. Earlier when we used to do drug discovery, we had to screen thousands and thousands of candidates to get to one. So that screening was so painful. But today, startups are developing technology by which the screening time of 3 years is going to be cut down to 15 days or a month. Imagine how much time are we saving, effort we are saving, and the scientists that will be required will be very limited just to do that. So very exciting times in our industry. There are a few more things where startups are investing in biotech. There is, where drugs can't treat. There are places where drugs can't treat. We have very difficult diseases, sickle cell disease or orphan diseases, very difficult to treat because you can't reach the target cells. Those areas, how can they be penetrated is something which we are seeing startups working on technology. There are new delivery methods. Even in, you look at in another, and again, something which might take you by a little bit of surprise. You might hear some of these things, but in another 6 to 8 months, there could be about 10 nasal vaccines for COVID that could be ready to go to the regulator. Nasal vaccines. So imagine the delivery systems that are changing, and we have been having this issue for a long time to create a nasal insulin. That why should insulin be injected? Why can't it be inhaled? Inhaled insulin has been something on the platform for last several years. We have not been able to make a breakthrough, but looks like with what has happened with the vaccines, we might find some breakthrough there. So several areas, absolutely fascinating areas where biotechs are really making a difference. In India itself, I have now worked with quite a few, and I'll tell you the reason why I wanted to speak about my personal experience for the next 5 minutes is only because of this, is that I have seen numerous amounts of startups in India with very exciting science, very, very exciting science. And if I tell you some very interesting things, currently I'm talking to a company which has imaging device, an imaging device to detect breast cancer. And what is the base of that technology is the great strides made in trying to create an imaging technology. Now, this handheld device in a gynecologist or in a GP's chamber can be used in a very, very private way with no touch to ensure high level of detection, first level of detection for breast cancers. And I've been working with some of these companies. The model I'm trying to build along with some of my colleagues and some people in the industry is that we have seen very, very good funding coming to startups. We have seen startups moving from an idea to a product. These, let's say, developments have been very encouraging in the last 5 years or so. What we have not seen is the fact that these products do not get feedback from the market as to the viability of the product and are they really useful in real time. The second gap we see is that there is lack of commercialization of these products into the marketplace, and therefore, despite having some good ideas, despite having a good product, despite having adequate funding, they are not reaching their target customer. This gap is something which we are trying to fill as a company and as an industry, but more as a company, what we are trying to do is create an ecosystem around us that we are encouraging startups to come and talk to us and say, okay, tell us about your product, tell us about your technology, let's try and see what we can do. And we tell them, look, it's interesting that you have an idea, but if you do the simple thing of handing over commercial rights to us, we will take it to the marketplace. That is your best chance to succeed. We have enough capability in the marketplace, and if it works for you. If it doesn't work, you have nothing to lose, because at least you know that you did not have the risk to commercialize and fail. The risk is with me of commercialization. With this, we have brought about already 4 devices and 2 diagnostics to the market. And some of the technology is amazing. I'll tell you one technology in biotech which is very, very interesting is, and obviously because of COVID, everybody now knows PCR technique and understands that technology a little better. Anybody walking into your office says that I have done an RT-PCR. It's great that people understand this. There is a lot of awareness, but there is a certain level of technology that is available now because of that. One of the worst things that happens in ICU in a hospitalized patient is that hospitalized patient, if is hospitalized due to an infection, which nearly 70% of the patients in ICU are, what happens is that you take a sample, you do culture, it takes 72 hours to get to culture report before we can decide what is the right line of treatment and whether it is a bacterial or a fungal infection. 72 hours. The mortality rate between 0 to 72 hours is extremely high. Extremely high if the infection has reached bloodstream in a particular way or at that particular threshold. This technology that we have now worked with a startup actually might be able to tell you in 12 to 24 hours, 12 to 24 hours, susceptibility of the microorganism that is there in the infection. So now you will be able to cut down the time from 72 hours to 24 hours. You take the mortality rate that exists between 24 hours to 72 hours, and it's an amazing story of how many lives can be saved just because there is a startup in biotechnology which is trying to do it. But again, they have one year they were struggling with trying to ask people what to do with it. We have been able to install it in a few hospitals. We are working with a couple of leading places in India, academic institutions, to see how this can work. If this works, imagine how much we can contribute to saving human lives. So there are many such ideas that we are seeing. And my biggest, let's say, thought around this is that we need to support as industry who have the wherewithal of presence, who have the ability to bring products to the market, who have the reach in the marketplace. If we don't get involved in the ecosystem of startups, we will be doing a big disservice to scientists who are working very hard there. Or even humanity might miss out on something that can be very, very useful. So in our industry, when we look at trying to support this, we have to look at it from a bigger noble cause that we can provide to the environment by really helping ideas that can save lives. And then numerous such examples. I'll tell you another nice example that we are seeing now on, so 1 in every 10 couples struggle to have a child in India. And so also in many countries in the world. Now, that's 10% of the couples. Out of that 10%, you might find a few percentage where you can counsel, get better, understanding, and you solve some of those problems. But you'll be left with about roughly 2 to 3% of the couples who have to get interventions, who need, let's say, fertility hormones or treatment that is required. Now, in that case, there is the story of sperm selection. We're looking at a technology which can actually tell you which kind of sperm selection would work well. Now, imagine that screening gives you so much satisfaction that you are not taking any risk with the child that would be born. You are sure that the child will be healthy. With that level of technology, imagine what would happen to predictability of fertility treatment. So there is so much exciting work happening in startups, and I can go on and on because the numerous ideas that I have been looking at and working with. But my only submission to VCs is that because there is a lot of VC people here and the startups here, I have one big suggestion, that do not ignore the fact that you might have an idea, you might have funding, you might be able to build a product, but do not ignore the thought at the beginning of where you are, that ultimately it should benefit humanity and benefit people. If that is the case, involve the commercialization story much earlier in the game and not later in the game, because it is important to fail fast and fail early. It's only then will you succeed also quicker. So some of these ideas are bound to fail. Some of the products are not going to work out in the marketplace, but you might get feedback much earlier in the game. You may not have to wait endlessly to get that feedback. This is an extremely important point, which I never realized until about, let's say, 2 years ago, how important this was. To get to at the heart of the issue is that many startups fail because they do not have a uh, commercialization strategy in place. And I see high quality scientists struggling and roaming around trying to meet people and see what can be done about their product. So they have a high quality product in hand, but they don't have a clue how to get it to the market. So this gap is something which needs to be filled also along with it. And I have been devoting a considerable amount of time to see what we can do more as people, as community, as companies, to see that this happens. So to conclude, I think we are in a very, very exciting phase. I see a lot of diseases that we can clearly visualize because of newer technology coming in, and especially biotechnology coming in. We might be able to resolve those diseases in a better fashion in the next few years, provided we create a full ecosystem by which we are able to tie up all ends of the spectrum and not lose out on anything. I'm really hoping that some of these ideas that are presented today or even later are ideas that even we can take interest, or we can tell other people who might be interested in these ideas, and ensure that these products reach the marketplace where they deserve to be. So I wish the VC session all the best. I also will participate for some time. I think I'm very eager to also listen to a few stories. But once again, thank you to the organization for calling me, organizers to calling me here. And it was my feeling that I must share my experiences rather than tell you what is happening globally, what is happening all around, throw some numbers at you. But I thought it is better idea to share my own experience, because that is where the real contribution should be. And I'm very in a very happy space that we are able to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Wonderful insights. In fact, it is a music to the ears for all the startups, because one, you have actually thrown up the amount of vast opportunity for the startups in India, and more importantly, even the pharmaceutical industry coming forward, eagerly looking at some of these thought-provoking and innovative ideas from the startups, and the helping hand getting extended by the pharma to the startups. I think there can be nothing better than these words to kick off today's sessions. Thank you so much once again for accepting our invite and delivering the keynote. We have received a number of applications from startups. We would like to share that with you, and maybe you can actually have a look at them at your leisure, and
Sure.
you can interact with them.
Sure.
Thank you once again, Sanjeev. Wonderful.